The Western world. As a half German, half English dude born and raised in the Netherlands, it is pretty obvious that I am a Westerner. But what does being a Westerner really mean? You see it all the time online, people complaining about us. Like with the lovely anime versus cartoon discussion that pops up randomly on Twitter every now and then. So, is it safe to ask what the hell even is the Western world? Well, according to this guy Huntington, it is the US, Canada, Aussies, Kiwis, the European Union, and I don't know, I guess Eastern Europe and Latin America too or something? Okay, already from the start we see some consistency issues here. Huntington is clearly high or something. But one obvious thing you noticed is that most of those countries are either European colonial powers or their former colonies. Often when people talk about the Western world, they also usually imply that they are the more developed or more technologically advanced than the rest of the world. This has to do simply because these Western countries had an advantage because of the Industrial Revolution. This is kind of why the term westernization, industrialization and modernization are used interchangeably. I have seen this map of global north and south pop up quite a bit, and yes, we are still talking about Western nations. And I like to call this map the Western Pals. You got the West, but also their pals! Yeah, this map still needs some updating. In this map, we got the usual Western suspects, and also some others. Notably Turkey, Israel, South Korea, Japan, Hong Kong and Macau, Taiwan and Singapore. And as you have noticed, there are plenty of Eastern and Southern countries on here, so what the hell? I only wanted to find out what the West is. In a normal world, that would mean splitting the world map in half. One is West, other is East. Simple as that. But no, people have to change the meaning of directions. Like Ausland or New Zealand. You guys are as southeast as you can get, but most people will consider them Western like the US or Europe. There's a lot of bullshit like this going on. Like how Canada still has a province called British Columbia, even though it is long not part of Britain anymore. Change the name or hand it back. You can't have both. But as you can see, people often mix the West as an economic and cultural term. I said in the intro of this video that I am half German and half English, but the German half of me is from East Germany. Yes, that one. Which back in the day was not considered the West at all. Also, because of this, I have some Eastern European blood on my German side. Am I still a Westerner then, or did it magically cancel out because of my Eastern blood? Times have changed. The West aren't the only ones that are the most technologically advanced. For example, to me, what people often mean with developed or Western countries are large consumer economies, or household final consumption expenditure, so in other words, countries with households that can buy a lot of stuff. If you look at total numbers, the US, China, Japan and the United Kingdom are on top. But hold on, people do not really consider China completely modernized or westernized. Well, if you check the per capita version, you will notice that Switzerland, the US, Australia, Norway and Luxembourg come up on top. And China is way low on that list. And look at the map of consumption per capita, you are starting to see a pattern here. Also, Japan is in the G7 and is the only Asian country in the G7. Hell, they were even in it when it was still the G5 before Canada and Italy joined. But it is not only economics, politics is also relevant. Because countries like Japan, Taiwan, Korea and Singapore are aligned to the West diplomatically. We can easily visit those nations as Westerners and they can easily visit us. Also, if you do business related things, you will hear about those countries a lot. Also, with recent events in Russia, the countries that sanctioned Russia aggressively are mostly Western nations and their allies. Another thing you probably notice all the time when people talk about the West are the more progressive policies countries have in North America and Europe. often linked with human rights, or as some like to call it, Western values, which aren't really Western by the way, but a lot of Western countries tend to have them and promote them. That is kind of where all that fear-mongering comes from those weirdo anime fans that claim that Western countries are trying to corrupt Japan with this annoying agenda, or something. Which is kind of funny to hear, especially when a Japanese creator actually responds to them. This is what you call anti-Western sentiment, which dictatorships love to promote because it is a good excuse to keep suppressing their own people, and to discredit and delegitimize progressive movements in these countries. But obviously, Asian countries like Japan and South Korea are culturally different from Europe and North America, and also quite a bit from each other. Oh yeah, right, Asia is not a monolith. These countries are miles away from each other and have different cultures, and each have their own stories how they ended up the way they did. Like Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea and Hong Kong used to be developing countries but got really rich after the 1960s. Some people like to call them the 4 Asian Tigers. Japan industrialized around the same time other European powers did, during the Meiji era. That's why they managed to do the whole colonialism trend that was so big in Europe at the time. So to put it short, what people mean with the West are usually countries that were former colonial powers with a high consumer economy and are generally more progressive socially. Of course, there are exceptions to this, but as this video sort of tries to make clear, the West is not really something consistent. We know who we mean with it, but we can't really explain it, and everyone has their own interpretation about it. But if you are from a Western country, or a country that can be considered Western, you should be grateful. I sure as hell am. There are people in this world still starving to death or have to work like it's Heart of Darkness. Because simply put, living in a large consumer economy with a progressive society that's protected by the strongest armies on earth and being able to visit loads of places without a visa is a privilege a lot of people in this world simply do not have. So if you are bitching about the West as a Westerner, just try not to sound too pretentious about it. But what do you guys think? Is the country you live in considered Western in any way? Do you identify as a Westerner? Or did I miss something? Be sure to comment about that stuff down below. So, I hope you guys liked this video. Be sure to dominate the sub button, and I will see you guys next time with whatever I make. Keep watching hentai.